Welcome to the BTEC Certificate Assignment 1. Here are some brief guidelines. In order to successfully pass the assignment, you're advised to read around the topic per each pass criteria. So for Pass 1, you must read around the topic of precedent. Once you've done this, you'll become familiar with all the relevant key terms, and this presentation will make more sense to you. This course has 3 assignments in it, and they will all require research both inside and out of the classroom. You're advised to get a good AS Law textbook, use the website Help with Law Exams, and also any other UK-based online resources. Okay, so long as you follow these guidelines, make sure you've done your reading before you attempt each of the criteria, you will be on track. For P1, this is what you'll need to do. Follow these 5 boxes. Start off with the rose-coloured box and what is precedent. That could be your first paragraph. Make sure that you have covered in your explanation of what precedent is, both binding precedents and persuasive precedents. Within that, you must have covered an explanation of the ratio decidendi, which is the reason for the decision, and the obiter dicta, other things said by the way, which can be found in the judgment. This will all make sense to you if you make sure that you've done your reading around precedent. Look at the light green shaded box that says court hierarchy. Now for this, make sure that you mention the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeal. When you mention the Supreme Court, you're going to need to cover the Practice Statement 1966. When you mention the Court of Appeal, it will be the young exceptions. Once you've done that, cover the ways in which judges can avoid precedent, as well as the advantages and disadvantages of precedent, and you will have covered P1. You'll find information for P2 in any chapter on parliamentary lawmaking, or even a subheading on how bills become acts of parliament. In order to satisfy this pass requirement, you need to write information about each of the things that you can see on this diagram. So starting with the first reading all the way through to the third reading. Then you discuss the fact that the whole process from first, second committee report, third, gets repeated in the second house, and if it successfully goes through the second house, it then receives royal assent. So you could basically use this diagram, but just make sure that you have information for each of the stages. Remember, as this is a coursework orientated course, you need to make sure that your presentation is visually stimulating, that it looks good. Okay, so follow this diagram, make sure there's information for each stage, and you will have satisfied this requirement. For P3, you'll need to turn to the chapter on delegated legislation in your textbook, or look for delegated legislation online. To cover this, all we need from you is that you provide information on the 3 types of delegated legislation. So a paragraph on statutory instruments, a paragraph on bylaws, and a paragraph on orders in council will be sufficient for the pass criteria for this task. For P4, you need to turn to a chapter that describes influences on Parliament, and you're very likely to find this very near to a parliamentary lawmaking chapter. What you need to cover is the influence of the media to influence lawmaking, pressure groups and how they influence lawmaking, politics and government, and commissions like law reform bodies. Again, once you sit back, pause, read through the chapter, or look online, make sure it's not an American site, you will have enough information for each of these 4 boxes. P5, outline the rules for statutory interpretation. You need to turn to the statutory interpretation chapter in your AS Law textbook. In order to cover this sufficiently, you will provide information on the literal rule, the golden rule, and the mischief rule. Remember, it's an outline, so enough information that describes all three of these rules. P5 is also going to be found in your statutory interpretation chapter. Now, for each of these Latin rules of language, you just need to provide an explanation about what each of these means. By the time you finish, you probably will have written about 3/4 of a page, including your examples. So this shouldn't take you a long time to do. In fact, I would say that one of your lessons would be plenty of time in which to cover this particular task. Okay, for P6 you need to be on a chapter to do with European law. Now you need to provide information about the role of the European Parliament, the role of Council of Ministers, and the role of the European Commission. Remember, you do have the website Help with Law Exams. Alongside a good AS Law textbook, there'll be enough information for you to write enough about each of these sections. You'll also find lots of information on Europe on BBC websites too. For P6, which is your final pass criteria, you are still going to be on a chapter to do with European law, and in order to provide information here you need to write about treaties, directives and regulations. Again, remember, for all the pass criteria 1 to 6, so long as you sit back and do your reading first and make sure you understand what you've read, you will find information on all the things that have been flagged up in each of these slides. In order to successfully complete the merit criteria, you're going to need to show us that you can research well. This will mean going to the library, using different textbooks. It will mean going online and doing some research. It will mean really thinking about the pass criteria from 1 to 3, that's P1, P2 and P3, and comparing precedents and their importance today with that of lawmaking by legislation, as well as including delegated legislation if you want to. Now, 1 page of information typed in font 12 is going to be enough. We will not be giving you a great deal of assistance on this. This is where you need to show us what you can do. For M2, again, it's going to be very similar to the M1. You need to research this, you need to do some reading. We'll guide you and help you, but we will not be able to provide you with the information on this. You're going to have to show that you can open a textbook, that you can do the reading, that you can go to the library. The more sources you use, the better. Again, make sure you don't use American sites. So for M2, you will have analysed the impact of the commissions, media, politics and pressure groups on Parliament when it's making law. 1 page of information typed in font 12 is going to be enough for this merit requirement. Okay, for merit 3, you will be analysing the importance of statutory interpretation. Why do we need statutory interpretation? Why do we need those 3 rules of interpretation? The mischief rule, the golden rule, the literal rule. Why do we have the Latin terms for those different rules of language. So you need to write in a more evaluative sense why we have statutory interpretation. 1 page of information typed in font 12 is going to be enough for this. Okay, so now you know what to do.